Ever wondered if India is becoming a dictatorship? This question has been making the rounds, stirring up quite a debate. India, a country known for its vibrant democracy, seems to be at a crossroads, with some recent events and decisions prompting this discussion. The world has been watching as policies and actions are implemented, which some believe are redolent of an authoritarian regime. While we won't delve into the specifics just yet, it's important to note that these concerns aren't just local chatter. They extend beyond India's borders, capturing global attention. Yet it's not all black and white. There are varying viewpoints to this question, each backed with its own set of arguments and counter-arguments. So, are we truly witnessing a shift in India's political climate, or is this merely a storm in a teacup? In today's video, we will delve into this question and compare India's current political situation with historical examples of dictatorships. So buckle up and let's embark on this enlightening journey together. Before we proceed, it's important to understand what a dictatorship is. Simply put, a dictatorship is a form of government where power is concentrated in the hands of an individual or a small group. This goes beyond just having a strong leader. In a dictatorship, this power is often maintained through the suppression of opposition and the restriction of freedom. To illustrate, let's take a stroll down memory lane. Remember the Roman dictator Julius Caesar? He held absolute power, and his rule, though short-lived, was marked by the suppression of political rivals. Or think of North Korea's Kim dynasty, where power has been concentrated within one family for 3 generations, with severe restrictions on freedom of speech and thought. So, the key characteristics of a dictatorship include a concentration of power, suppression of opposition, and restriction of personal freedoms. This isn't about being right or wrong, it's about understanding the nature of political power. Now that we have defined a dictatorship, let's see how India's current political situation compares to this. India, the world's largest democracy, has been showing some signs that have sparked this debate. Let's delve into the current political scenario of this vibrant nation. In recent years, we've witnessed a series of events and decisions that have raised eyebrows and stirred conversations. The centralization of power in the hands of a few, the passing of controversial laws without extensive parliamentary debate, and the increasing influence of the government over media outlets are just a few examples. Take the Citizenship Amendment Act, for instance. When it was passed in late 2019, it sparked widespread protests due to its perceived discriminatory nature. The government's response was seen by many as heavy-handed, leading to further unrest and division. Similarly, the abrogation of Article 370, which granted special status to the region of Jammu and Kashmir, was conducted without a comprehensive dialogue with the stakeholders. This move too stirred up controversy and was viewed by some as a sign of an authoritarian approach. However, it's essential to maintain a balanced perspective. Despite these concerns, there are still strong democratic elements present in India. The country continues to hold regular, free and fair elections. The judiciary remains largely independent, often acting as a check on government overreach. The vibrant civil society, active non-governmental organizations, and the freedom of citizens to voice their opinions are testament to the democratic spirit that still prevails in India. Moreover, the government's actions can also be viewed as decisive leadership, necessary to address the complex challenges India faces. For example, the swift response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the implementation of the world's largest vaccination drive showed a government capable of taking bold steps in times of crisis. Still, the increasing centralization of power, the suppression of dissent, and the perceived erosion of institutional autonomy are issues that cannot be ignored. They serve as reminders that democracy is a continuous process, requiring constant vigilance and active participation from its citizens. These events have raised questions about the direction in which India's democracy is headed. So, as we continue to discuss India's political climate, let's remember that the essence of democracy lies in the balance of power and the voice of the people. Now let's see how these signs compare with historical examples of dictatorships. Historically, dictatorships have sprung up in various forms, each unique in its manifestation, but sharing some common traits. These include the concentration of power in a single entity, suppression of opposition, and the curtailment of individual freedoms. Let's take a look at some examples. In the mid-20th century, We witnessed dictatorships like those of Adolf Hitler in Germany and Benito Mussolini in Italy. They centralized power, suppressed opposition, controlled media, and curtailed individual freedoms, all under the guise of national pride and progress. In stark contrast, India's democratic framework, enshrined in its constitution, guarantees the separation of powers among the executive, legislative, and judiciary branches. It ensures the right to freedom of speech and expression and the right to protest peacefully. However, some critics argue that recent trends in India show signs of authoritarianism, such as the alleged control over media and the suppression of dissent. They point out instances where laws are being used to quell protests or silence critics, drawing parallels with historical dictatorships. But it's essential to remember that not all signs of authoritarianism necessarily lead to a dictatorship. Democracies, by nature, are complex and can exhibit authoritarian tendencies during times of crisis. It doesn't always signify a slide into dictatorship. For instance, during the emergency in India in the mid-70s, there was a temporary suspension of civil liberties, but the country did not become a dictatorship. Instead, it saw a robust response from its citizens, reaffirming the democratic ethos of the nation. In conclusion, while there may be some similarities between the current situation in India and historical dictatorships, there are also significant differences. India's vibrant civil society, independent judiciary, and free and fair elections are pillars that uphold its democracy. While there are some parallels, there are also major differences between India's current situation and historical dictatorships. So, is India becoming a dictatorship? This is the question we've been exploring throughout this video, delving into various aspects that could potentially indicate a shift towards a more autocratic style of leadership. We've examined the essence of a dictatorship, where power is concentrated in the hands of one individual or a select few, and the people's voice is often suppressed. We've also taken a close look at India's present political landscape, noting the signs that might suggest a tilt towards authoritarian rule. Key indicators include the centralization of power, diminishing freedom of speech, and the alleged manipulation of democratic institutions. We've seen examples of these trends in India's current political climate, raising questions about the country's democratic health. But it's not as straightforward as it sounds. Democracy is not merely a binary existence. It's a spectrum with varying degrees of freedom and control. And India, with its rich tapestry of cultures, languages, and political ideologies, is a complex entity. We've journeyed back in time, drawing comparisons with historical dictatorships to give context to our discussion. While there are parallels, it's important to remember that history doesn't always repeat itself. Each country's path is shaped by its unique circumstances and the will of its people. Despite the worrying signs, there are still elements of robust democracy present in India. The country continues to hold regular elections, the judiciary often acts as a check on the government, and the media, despite facing challenges, still voices divergent opinions. The vibrant civil society, the active participation of citizens in protests, and the occasional electoral surprises are testament to the democratic spirit that still thrives in the nation. So, while there are reasons for concern, painting the entire country with a broad brush of impending dictatorship might be an oversimplification. Indeed, it's a dynamic situation that warrants constant vigilance and active participation from all stakeholders. While there are concerns, it's crucial to remember that India remains the world's largest democracy. The debate, however, continues.